doesn't tell us to shut down our emotions or suppress our grief. That's a misunderstanding. Stoicism is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. It teaches us to confront reality, not run from it. To say, this hurts, but I will not let it define me. To recognize that love doesn't require self-destruction. That attachment is not the same as connection. Loyalty to someone else should never come at the cost of betrayal of yourself. So today, I'm not here to ask you to erase someone you loved. I'm here to help you unclip yourself from the pain that's still tied to them. Through the ancient wisdom of Marcus Aurelius and Stoic Rules, you'll learn how to disentangle our broken bonds. The goal is not to harden. The goal is to come back to life. Now ask yourself this: are you ready to let go of yourself? Let's begin. Letting go is an act of courage, an intentional decision to stop bleeding for battles never meant to be yours. Imagine holding a rope that's burning your hand. The tighter you grip it, the deeper it cuts. That's what it's like holding on to someone who has emotionally walked away. You're not moving alone. So pause. Ask yourself, why am I still trying to hold on? What not as we wish they were. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When we romanticize someone who hurt us, we are reacting from emotion, not clarity. We are choosing illusion over truth, and every time we revisit that illusion, we pour our energy into a ghost that cannot love us, cannot show up, cannot heal us. It's time to take that person off the pedestal, to stop idealizing someone who couldn't give you what you needed. Maybe they weren't evil, maybe they were just unavailable, or unaware, or simply not ready for the kind of emotional depth you brought to the table. But regardless of why, they left a scar, and pretending they didn't isn't strength, it's denial. Ask yourself this: if someone constantly made you feel anxious, imagined version of how things could have been. In that empty space, begin again. Begin writing something new, something honest, something that doesn't cast you as the second choice of life. 3. Create distance to regain clarity. When your emotions are low, closeness becomes corrosive. Proximity, physical, digital, emotional, can turn into poison. Trying to stay near someone you're trying to detach from is like trying to dry your clothes while standing in rain. You keep hoping to heal, but you're still right there in the storm, drenched in your presence. That's why the Stoics value distance, not just from people, but from illusions, impulses, and distractions that cloud judgment. They understood that clarity doesn't require chaos, it requires stillness. You must build up your There's a kind of power that only comes back when you reclaim your attention. Clarity is a powerful space. When you step back, you begin to see the relationship differently. You see the dynamic with sober eyes, the things you tolerated, the boundaries you ignored, the parts of yourself you toned down just to feel needed. You remember friends. We track mood shifts like we're forecasting the weather. It becomes a full-time job, managing the unpredictability of someone who chooses to show up with clarity, consistency, or care. Just exploring the power of mastering your reaction instead of trying to control someone else's behavior. Because real peace doesn't live in their impulse, it begins in knowing yourself. But here's the problem. The more you focus on them, the more disconnected you become from yourself. And that's the real trap. It's right there, in that quiet space between overthinking and obsession, where emotional attachment continues to feed itself. It thrives not because of what you do, but because of how you keep trying to control it. The Stoics call it cultivate. It is not things that disturb you that you choose to ignore. It's yourself constantly reminding you suffer because of how you treat yourself instead of because they change. It's the right behavior that cuts the deepest wounds, not interpretation. That's the power that lies in your response. It hurts when someone feels like a dagger in your chest. You don't smile. When they fade from your life, you don't make that mean your love has failed. Because it's true. Their choices don't define your worth. Your emotions show up in your pause. The moment you become conscious of choosing response rather than reacting impulsively, you become emotionally detachable. That doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you observe them. You create space between stimulus and response. You react when you're triggered instead of conforming. Of course, this isn't easy, especially when love is still alive inside of you. But it's essential, because every emotional outburst, every moment of overthinking, every desperate message only fuels the very fire you're trying to put out. You don't need to change their behavior. You only need to change the meaning you assign to it. Imagine the strength it takes to be capable of indifference and still choose dignity. To face someone walking away and still choose self-respect. That is the Stoic response. That is the beginning of emotional maturity. And it's not just about them, it's about your whole life. Because people will always shift, disappoint you with love and surprise you with grief. Your peace depends on their behavior. Your peace will always be unstable. But if your peace is grounded in your intention, your clarity, your principles, then nothing and no one can truly break you. Because Christ literally encouraged you to pause and ask yourself, does this feel genuine or is it performative? Is it just trying to get attention so that it can move on? Is it inspired by love or is it superficial? Let the world begin with awareness. Let the world begin with being honest with yourself. And the only conclusion you must make is simple. Redefine love as love, not happiness. Redefine love as something you give, not something you chase. Most of us were raised to believe that love is something you get, something that keeps you on the outside. Giving money to others, validating good intention, acknowledging presence, something that practice will withdraw. Is that something essential just because you want happiness? Or do you want a piece of our identity? As in the story. But that idea of taking control is exactly why love might feel like devastation. The truth is, love was never something you had to chase. It was something you carried all along, deep within you. The Stoics didn't write much about romantic love in the way we define it today. But their core philosophy goes even deeper. They taught that virtue, living in alignment with reason, integrity, and wisdom, is the highest good. Real love, true love, is virtuous. It does not demand, it does not manipulate, it does not break, it just honesty, depth, and courage, then it becomes something unshakable, even in the face of rejection. So many people remain emotionally stuck, not because they're still in love, but because they never felt seen. They hold on, hoping that person will come back, not out of romance, but in validation, to prove, my love mattered, I mattered. But what if you already did? What if the fact that you loved fully, with all your soul, is proof enough? What if the closure you're waiting for isn't a conversation, a message, or an apology, but a shift in your understanding of what love truly is? Ask yourself, am I loving because I want to offer something, or because I'm genuinely disposing something before you leave me? That question might scare you, but it reveals everything. Because the truth, love is not honesty. It's evidence, proof that love existed, that care, care, devotion, love something that you can't explain in yourself. And now, let's take a look at what saying "I love you" means in most people. Many people say something like, it means pain or connection. This might be one of the most dangerous illusions we fall into, right? We believe that because it still hurts, it must still mean something, that love, just as evidence of love, refuses to break, that the pain is part of the integrity of a person, that suffering is the story isn't over. What if pain isn't a sign of connection? What if pain is just a sign of resistance? What if it's not about having love at all, but about no longer unwillingness to let go of the story you've been telling yourself? You see, the mind craves meaning. When someone we love walks away, our brain scrambles to make sense of it. And because the silence feels unbearable, we begin to give value to the pain. We make it sacred. We tell ourselves things like, I still feel this way because what we had was real. But real love shouldn't trap you in suffering. Real connection isn't sustained by misery. If the only thing keeping them alive in your heart is your sadness, then that's not love. That's a wound. The Stoics taught us to look beyond surface emotions, to observe what's actually happening beneath them. As Epictetus said, when something happens, the only thing in your power is your attitude toward it. You can either accept it or resent it. Pain is inevitable, but how you interpret that pain, how you build a story around it, that's where your freedom begins and ends. Are you staying emotionally attached to your wounds because the love is still alive, or because the pain has become familiar and they aren't going to let you go? You may start to fear that maybe you're grieving sadness, or maybe you define love as something you give, not something you must chase. Stop making yourself post-romantic wholeness and begin to see love as giving, even when it isn't returned. But here's the real shift. If love is something you offer, and you get something back, to stay true to your own heart, then even when it isn't reciprocated, it doesn't shatter you. Why? Because you didn't lose it. You simply offered something beautiful, and now you're ready, and able to receive it. That's not your failure. That's the invitation. Redefining love doesn't mean shutting down or becoming emotionally distant. It doesn't mean building walls or turning your heart to stone. It means learning to love without the need to possess. It means having the strength to say, I cared deeply, I showed up fully, I gave all I had to give, and now it's time to walk away with my dignity still intact. Here's something to think about. If your self-worth depends on being chosen by someone else, your worth will always be vulnerable, always in someone else's hands. But if your worth is defined by how you choose to love, with Or are you simply addicted to the feeling of missing out? Because sometimes longing becomes a habit. Sometimes missing someone becomes a daily ritual. Not because the love is still alive, but because the ache has become familiar. And if you're not careful, you start confusing sadness with significance. You begin to believe that moving on would be some kind of betrayal, a disrespect to what you once shared out. But the truth, it's the opposite. Letting go isn't betrayal. It's the ultimate act of respect. Respect for yourself. Respect for what that connection once was. And respect for what your future deserves to become. If the pain is still sharp, that's okay. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But here's the warning. Don't push it away. Don't avoid it. Sit with it so long that it starts to feel like home. Let it walk toward your values. Let it redefine your future. Because here's the thing. When the energy is drained, your mind starts overthinking. Which answers? Is this real love you feel? Or just that lingering lack of something more important? The answer may be very clear. It's the answer one question brings you one step closer to peace. And that peace, it's not the end of a connection. It's the beginning of a brand new one. Become you again. Rule 7. Focus on becoming. Allow the story to end somewhere else. Don't worry about the story. Just end the connection. Rule 2. It's not the chapter, just close it. Close on your journey, your direction, your identity. Because you don't just grieve a person, you grieve the version of yourself that existed when they were still alive. And in that long haul, we often make a quiet, unconscious mistake. We start living in reverse. Looking back, replaying memories, comparing who we are now to who we were then. Wondering how it might have been if they'd just stayed. But healing doesn't happen by looking backward. Healing begins the moment you shift your gaze from who left you to who you're becoming. Stoicism isn't about denying your emotions. It's about directing them. And that direction should always guide you back toward your values, your clarity, your growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." And the same applies here. Don't waste your life wondering what that relationship could have become. Spend your life becoming the kind of person no longer needs anything. Pain is a stranger to intimacy. True forgiveness humbles us, strips away our chains, and forces us to become the kinds of ourselves that will outlast someone else. Maybe your sadness journey choose to keep you cucumbered. Maybe your shyness was a parachute. Maybe you gave and gave until you forgot what it felt like to receive. That was okay. That was your awakening. Because here's the truth. They may have broken you. The lesson didn't. And that lesson is sacred. It holds the room to become the next version of you. Wiser, stronger, more self-aware. And you can't become that version if you're still chasing ghosts. So ask yourself, what do you want to build now that you're gone? Not out of revenge, not to be liked, but because the time, the love, and the energy you once gave to them now belongs to you. Start small. Reconnect with your habits. Revisit the dreams you shelved while waiting for their attention. Read something that expands your soul. Move your body. Speak to yourself with the same kindness you so easily gave to them. Day by day, these aren't just the small steps. They're declarations. Declarations that say, I'm not stuck in the past. I'm not defined by what I lost. I'm building something better from the inside out. And yes, it's okay to come back. It's okay to miss them. You can remember them. You can bow free than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. What he meant was this: peace is not passive. It's forged in the fire of what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you pray for. So ask yourself, what am I still allowing that's disrupting my peace? Maybe it's replaying the same conversations in your head. Maybe it's holding out for a message that never comes. Maybe it's watching failed dates, their stories of love, hoping that by seeing them live, you'll somehow feel alive again. But you know it doesn't work. It only reopens the pain wound. Protecting your peace means closing the emotional tabs that still occupy it. It means choosing not to reply, just to check in. Is there a moment that you choose to stay emotionally grounded for a while? Step back, because every time you see their reaction fade, you're handing them over uncontrolled emotions. You're letting someone who's no longer in control control the outcome of your moments. Imagine your peace as a fire. Every time you love, every time you put a boundary, it adds heat. Every moment, every time you give your boundaries clarity. Instead of lying there watching for the flames to let you burn out, why can't you feel steady again? Here's the truth: no one else is going to protect your peace for you. That's your job. And sometimes protecting your peace, choosing silence, it means walking. It means choosing self over drama. Yes, it may feel like walking down a stone wall, but in time, you'll see it clearly. It is never lost. A self-respecting peace isn't loud, it isn't flashy, but it's powerful. It lets you breathe without avoiding. It returns your mornings, your rest, your joy. It reminds you that life can be calm, even if they're no longer in it. So protect it fiercely, because in a world and in a mind so full of noise, peace is the one thing that can't be bought, borrowed, or replaced. You've learned to protect your peace, to guard it like something sacred. Now it's time to reclaim your healing, not from them, but from within yourself. It's deeply human to believe that this is how life, if we could just understand, the pain would somehow vanish. That if peace came to us, why the world had melted away. But here's the stark truth: closure is rarely given. It's not something you receive from them, it's something you create within yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You always own the option of having no pain. There is never a need to worry about what could trouble your soul." And that holds true for aspirations and for pain. Think about that for a moment. Some people think because of how they relate to life, they let it just magically erase their own feelings. Some change suddenly, not because of you, but because they were never honest with themselves in the beginning. And some didn't wake up one morning, found progress, disappointed, and none waiting for closure from you like emotional death from the start. It's like waiting for stillness in the middle of a thunderstorm. They couldn't offer truth when they were close, but you could offer clarity now that you're guarding your heart. You don't need an explanation to move forward. What you need is a decision to stop needing their permission to heal, a decision to stop believing the tired emotional rosadas that have trailed behind, a decision to free yourself. Because here's the real truth: even if you had that final conversation, would it really change anything? Would it undo the months of silence? Would it erase the unanswered texts? Would it fix the moments when you begged for presence and were met with absence? More often than not, closure isn't about answers, it's about acceptance. It's realizing that what they didn't do about themselves or about them when you never did about your life. It's stepping back far enough to see the full picture. That love truth, we don't cling to who they are. We cling to who we wanted them to be. But hope without reality becomes a prison, and if you're not careful, you'll spend years trying to relive something that never actually existed. The Stoics would say it plainly: reality is your ally, illusion is your enemy. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every day to live in accordance with nature, not how he wished things were, but how they actually were. That's what emotional detachment requires: the courage to look fantasy in the eye and let it come, to accept that they weren't ready, that they didn't show up, that their silence spoke louder than any apology ever could. Freedom isn't found in irony, it's found in release. Because the longer you live in fantasy, the longer you press pause on your real life, you'll realize that freedom begins the moment you release the illusion and stop clinging to the story that never truly existed. The question is, will you choose to take up the space reality gives you? You record texts that never arrive. You reimagine conversations that never happened. You replay moments that never existed, creating a version of yourself that only lives in your mind. But while you sit there, frozen, longing, trapped in maybes and what-ifs, life is happening around you. Your future is knocking, but you can't hear it through the noise of your own illusions. Choosing freedom doesn't mean the pain vanishes overnight. It doesn't mean you suddenly stop missing reality. What it means is this: you finally decide that the truth, with all its sadness, all its healing, all its unfiltered clarity, is better than a beautiful lie. It means you accept the ending, even without the fairy tale. It means you choose presence over possibility, reality over fantasy, peace over pain. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what has this fantasy cost me? How many nights of peace have I traded for silence and uncertainty? How many mornings of clarity have I surrendered to confusion? How much confidence have I drained chasing someone who never even turned around to look back? And more importantly, what could I be creating, becoming, building if I finally let go? You are not here to live in what could have been. You are here to live in what is, and to build something beautiful from it. That shift begins the very moment you stop asking, will they ever come back? And instead start asking, what does my life look like when I no longer need them to? Because real love, the kind that is mutual, happy, and aligned, never needs to be chased. And the longer you hold space in your life for someone who's already left, the more reality is better. Peace, the power of letting yourself be the version of yourself you want to be. So choose freedom, choose clarity, choose hope, and walk forward, not in bitterness, but in gratitude. Walk with curiosity, not with guilt, because it's not the end. Let go because pride won't let you do what you deserve. Letting go doesn't mean you erased the past. It doesn't mean pretending you weren't involved. It doesn't mean you didn't love them. It means choosing peace over emotional chaos and standing in the middle and still saying, you deserve a better peace than illusion. And honoring what was, and releasing what no longer serves the person you are. Wisdom, like stones, is never about suppressing emotion. It is about directing it, channeling it, cultivating it into clarity, into stillness, into flow, into freedom. Because in the end, the real test is not whether someone loved you back. The real test is whether you can still love yourself, even when they didn't.